In today's episode, I talk about shading ink, the ultimate ink journal, and why manufacturers aren't making videos like these. What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Goulet here of gouletpens.com, and this is episode number 175 of Goulet Q&A. I'm really excited to be here. I've had a pretty exciting week. Rachel and I have introduced a new nephew into the world. Rachel's sister had a baby this week, so we're really excited. We're going to get to meet him this weekend. Super pumped. Baby's well, mom is well, everybody's doing well, and it's really exciting. So pumped for that to happen. And then, yeah, we've just been taking care of business around the home front, you know, doing all that kind of stuff. We have a car in the shop, you know, we're going to have to, I had a car, like the brake lines gave out and I had to, rather dramatic fashion. So everybody's okay, but just a lot of drama on the personal front on the Goulet family side. Won't get all into it here, but those of you who know some of the stuff we've been through recently, it has not let up, so it's all good. It's all good. We're very thankful for what we have. Talking about some products here, because we had a lot of stuff going on there too. I did want to talk to you about some of the Nemesign inks. So I think I mentioned these last week. I'm not 100% sure if I did or not, but I wanted to at least show them to you. So Nemesign has come out with some new inks. I have two of them here with me. They have a series of them. You can check them out on our website, but I just wanted to show you the packaging of them, and I show you these two specifically because I think these will be the some of the most notable and exciting ones. So they have kind of just a clean generic bottle. They have a label right here that tells you what color it is, but it's kind of like a larger version of the Iroshizuku mini bottle. It's not related to that at all, but it's that similar kind of shape and fashion. Pretty good volume. Let's see here. What is the volume on these? I need to look it up. But I believe it's 30 mil that you get with this. So you can check that out. These particular colors are Coalsack Nebula and Blue Snowball Nebula, and they are very shimmerific inks. Very, very high degree of shimmering going on with these ones. I've inked up in a couple of pens right now, and it is like, wow. I literally, I'm not even joking. I think I threw it out, but I had a paper towel that had the shimmering ink on it, and it actually shimmers on the paper towel, which is quite impressive. So you can probably even see that right there. So you don't really have to worry about your paper quality and getting shimmer with this particular ink, but yeah, check that out. It will get a little cloggy in the pens. You know, the more shimmer there is, the more you might run into some of that clog, but it cleans out pretty easily, and I've had it, it's performed fairly well in most of my pens, even some extra fine nibs and stuff, but you can actually get some shimmering in extra fines, which is kind of unusual. So you can check those out. Pretty reasonably priced. We have them on our site, and they are new, so that's kind of cool. Good to see new stuff coming out. And then what else have we got? The Visconti Chianti Shire. As of when I'm recording this, we haven't gotten them in, but by the time this video goes out, I'm thinking we will have them, or very shortly after, but you can check those out. There was one little snag with the Chianti Shire, so once they actually got it into the US, they realized it was packaged differently than what was originally expected, so it's a nicer, very large, robust gift box. I don't have one as of this recording to show you, but it's this huge box with a bottle of ink packaged in with it, so they raised the price on it a bit. Versus what we had advertised on our website previously. We're not just trying to get more money from you or anything, but that was something that came down from the manufacturer. So that is a bit of a change that's happened there, but if you're still interested in that, you can check that out and know that it's going to come in this just massive box. And then we got some other things that are going to be coming soon. Oh, sorry, we've launched some other exciting things this week. The Some Lines a Day, from Leuchtturm. We finally got those in. In full, and we were originally just going to carry the black, but we also decided to carry the orange and the blue as well. So we thought, you know, we'd give you a little bit of variety there. So we got that going on. Done a couple of, things related to bullet journaling this week. I actually posted a guest post over on Carabens on Bohoberry. Hers about, you know, intro to fountain pens. She posted something on our blog about intro to bullet journaling, so a little education sharing going on there. So if you're interested, you can check those out on either blog. And we got some other cool things that are going to be coming, like the Platinum 3776 Shunyo. If you're interested in that, you can check that one out. It's like a maroon kind of colored pen, so you can look at that one. It's very similar to the last limited edition that they had, just different color. And then we should have those somewhat soon. I don't have an exact date yet. And then another thing that we're going to have, we finally got restocked on some Aston leather pen cases. They changed tanneries, so there was a bit of a gap that we had, but we got the new cases in, and they smell fantastic, first of all, but the quality of the leather is really, really good. And I wanted to show you all the colors because we have this color right here, which is a dark brown, which we've never had before. So we sampled it up. We got a couple just to kind of look at the colors, and I wanted to show you all because we have it listed on our site as coming soon. We have them on order, so they'll be coming. So this is the black. This is the dark brown, which is very much like an espresso brown, as opposed to the cognac here, which is more of just kind of a traditional brown. And then we have the tan, which is like a camel color. So this is the 4 different versions of leather that you can get from Aston. And this is the Case 10 version that they have. I use a Case 10 pretty regularly. I keep it in the front pouch of my backpack, you know, for transporting pens and stuff. Big fan of those cases, so you can check those out. Some good options for you. Let's see here, what else? We did get restocked for like a hot minute on the TWSBI 580 turquoise. The 580 all turquoise, and I'm sure by the time this video goes out, they're going to be gone, and that's going to be it for us. We knew we had a one-shot shipment the last time that we got them in. We were told maybe we'd get a few more. We got a few more, and by now I'm sure they're gone, but the TWSBI may still have some, so go check out their site if you want to get some. I don't think they're going to be around for very long because it's a super hot color, but go check it out. And then we just heard that there was going to be a TWSBI Eco in turquoise as well, which is pretty cool. A lot of people getting excited about that. So that we will have at some point. I don't have an exact date for when that's coming yet, but I have heard that it is coming, so that's cool. Also just heard kind of some rumors. It's nothing super official, but there's rumors out there about a Pelican M200 in smoky quartz. So that's to match the ink that they have out. Like they've been doing that the last couple of years. You know, they did it with the amethyst, and then they did it with, what was the other one? The aquamarine. So now they're doing it with the smoky quartz too. So it's going to be a, you know, a brown translucent M200. So we'll have a few of those as well. And then coming somewhat soon, and I don't have exact dates for a lot of these things, next few weeks I think, the Visconti Medici, which is their new, what they call acro silk material. It looks a lot like the old Omos Arco celluloid. So it's really cool looking material. The pen is a faceted pen. Looks really, really sharp, so I'm pumped for that one. I'm hoping to do a video on that one to show it off a little bit because the material is just so amazing. And I'm still waiting on getting word from the Stipula Passaporto, so, you know, got that going on. Oh, I did get a couple more of the Stipula Etruria Prismas. By the time you see this, we may or may not have gotten them, but we were able to get our hands on a couple extra. So most of them are gone though, so. Very cool pen. I hope to encourage them to make other colors. They're not going to have this exact one again, but I'm hoping to have them do other colors with a similar kind of layered material. So something similar in a different color pattern maybe could be a possibility in the future. So if you're interested in that, you know, let me know. I'd be happy to nudge them in that direction if it's a possibility. All right, let's get on to the questions for this week, shall we? For some pen and writing questions. The first one is from Julia M on Facebook. Not sure if it's been covered before, but here goes. How do you really feel about Montblancs? I know someone who only owns Montblancs as a status symbol. In your opinion, why has the Montblanc achieved such status? And is there any other pen that works as well as a status symbol, yet is also a great pen? My little platinum preppy never fails me, but status symbol, it is not. Well, it's all in the eye of the beholder, right? So I own several Montblancs. I will show you them now because I don't know that I've ever shown you my little mini Montblanc collection, right? Because it's, you know, usually I'm only getting pens that I sell because I'm a retailer and I buy things at wholesale, and it makes sense for that. But I do get gifted pens every now and then, or I get deals, or I can do trades or something like that. That can happen, but typically I'm more spending time familiarizing myself with the pens that I carry, right? Because it makes sense, because that's what I get asked about all the time. But I do have a few, so I'll kind of show you what I have and just what my experience I have with them. So I have a couple of staples, which I wanted to get just because I get asked about them a lot. I have the Montblanc 149, which is very much an iconic fountain pen, big nib, big pen, piston filling. I have this one in a double broad, so it's just a huge, massive nib, massive pen. I have the Montblanc 146, which is slightly smaller, and a similar kind of version though, smaller nib, things like that, but also kind of classic rhodium trim on this one, which is really nice. I like the look of that. Then I have some of the more special ones, I guess it would be called, the less regular ones. So this is the Montblanc Leo Tolstoy, which has got the little star on the top there, and this one is piston as well. And this one is a really nice writer. I actually really like the weight of that. Look is a little interesting. I had the 1912 here, the Heritage 1912, I believe it's called, which is a kind of a safety pen, you know, where the nib like comes out like that. So it's kind of neat, you know, whoop, and then, so that's kind of interesting. Not super duper functional for me because I like more of a quick draw pen, but it is really kind of cool. And then I have the Strauss as well, which has a little violin bow. And then, you know, kind of a conventional pen, all piston filling as well. So all of these are pistons actually. And then Rachel has a Bohème, a little small thing. So that is most of my experience with Montblancs is these pens right here, which I feel gives me a pretty, I mean, how many do you need, right? To really, it's like, well, I guess I'm not considered a collector by any means, but I do have a few of these, and I have to say they are of great quality. Like the craftsmanship is really nice. They're very nice pens. The theming and stuff like that is pretty cool. Like they do a good job. Like I understand why there's some hype around it, and it makes a lot of sense. As far as your question about like the status symbol and stuff like that, that is a lot due to marketing. Like there's no question they make some good products, but is it because of how standoutish their products are that they've achieved this status symbol? No, it's because of marketing. I mean, yeah, you have to make a good product. You can't just market a piece of garbage and have an amazing status. You have to have a certain level of quality and stuff like that and design before you can even attempt to achieve a certain level of status appeal. But there's no doubt they've done very, very aggressive marketing in terms of, you know, status and fashion and you know, exclusivity and stuff like that. They've laid that groundwork for a long time, and they definitely have achieved that as a status. In fact, you know, when I tell people that don't really know me that well, or I'm meeting them, or family members or whatever, you know, extended family or something like that, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm telling them what I do. I'm in the fountain pens and the writing business and stuff like that. Montblanc is always one of the brands that people come up, people who don't know that much about pens, they're like, oh, so you carry pens like Montblanc? And I'm like, well, yes, not them exactly, but, you know, one similar to them. Because it's just like, okay, you know, I've written to the Montblanc, and they really only like to deal with brick and mortar established stores. They've written us and said they're not interested in I haven't reached out to them in a while, but you know, they have given me at least some feedback a little bit before, but you know, they're not interested at this time. But maybe you should write them a letter or something and just tell them, you know, the Goulet should carry, whatever. I don't know. I'm not trying to start a campaign or anything, but you know, it's just at this time it's not going to happen. So that's fine. You know, that's their prerogative, and I totally respect that. You know, we've been through this before. Lamy was like that at a time. Visconti was like that at a time. Pilot initially was like that even. So you know, we've been through this before, and just got to bide my time. And if they see that we could represent it in the way that they would want to represent it, then they could do it. But you know, I'm also sitting here in a t-shirt talking about fountain pens, so maybe I don't fit their image. I don't really know. But either way, I'm going to keep doing my thing. If it happens to work for them, that's cool. I do like their pens. I think they make a good product. I do believe that you're paying a premium for the brand name and the status symbol. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, unless it's just not within your value system to do that. For certain, if you walk around with a pen with the white star in your pocket, to some people out there, that's going to mean something, you know, just like any fashion piece would. Just like if you wear a certain type of watch, or if you wear, you know, Gucci glasses or something like that, that is saying something more than just the quality of the product itself. So I think it gets into this stratosphere a bit, you know, not stratosphere, but it gets into this atmosphere of, you know, you're paying for some intangible qualities here, not purely just writing performance and stuff like that. I think the writing performance is solid, and they have a fan base for a reason in the writing community. But yes, you are paying a premium for that recognition and for that branding. I 100% believe that. That's kind of where I stand with it. I think, you know, I don't have an extensive collection because I'm not a huge status guy. I'm much more of a utilitarian in my stuff, so I'm more about value and not necessarily all the status stuff, which maybe that's why they don't want to write me back and have me carry this stuff. But hey, you know, that's just kind of my thing, you know. But I totally get it. I really do. I get the appeal. So that's where I'm at. Solid pens, interesting stuff. They are the ones, they're doing a lot of things right, and that's why they have the respect they do. All right, next question. This is from Karl K on Facebook. You make wonderful, easy to follow instructional videos as a retailer, but I have not seen many made by the actual manufacturers of their own pens, except Noodler's. Have they conceded that retailers and pen enthusiasts might be the best instructors of their products? Yeah, so I think a lot of manufacturers are focusing on what they do best, which is making products. When you get into doing videos and this kind of stuff, it's really a different ball game, and it requires a different skill set, it requires a different focus, it requires really a fair amount of time, not just from the actual recording of the video, because, you know, quite frankly, anybody can sit down in front of a video and talk about pens. But to actually consistently do videos like this and build a brand and have the engagement and the follow-up that creates the kind of following like we're talking about here, that requires a significant commitment. And I think for most manufacturers to get into that would require hiring several people to really be able to make that happen. At least 2 people probably, because really even doing it as one person is very difficult. You have to have a lot of deep product knowledge to be able to do that as one person. You would really need probably a couple of people to make it happen. And that's a pretty significant investment. I do believe that it would pay off if they were to do that. Personally, as a retailer, it would make my life a lot easier if a lot of manufacturers would do a lot of their own marketing, you know. But the thing is, we are in a very niche market here, and when you're talking about doing videos like this, like, yeah, the video thing isn't like a brand new thing, but in the perspective of most pen manufacturers, it is really a pretty new way of doing business, especially when you consider you're talking about brands that are 40, 50, 80, 120, 350 years old. Yeah, the last 5 to 10 years of online video really being a thing, you know, that's really pretty cutting edge as far as they're concerned. So it's not something that they're necessarily looking at jumping right into, especially when you consider some of these are global brands. And, you know, definitely in some parts of the world, the online video thing is catching on more than others. I think it, you know, personally, I've gone like all in on it, right? So like, I don't have to justify to you guys like why I think it's a good idea, but I think in their mind, like they have established traditional relationships and channels and methods of marketing. And the video thing is just completely outside of that. So for them to just go all in on it would really require an intentional kind of shift and a move and a strategic, you know, lever for them to pull. Whereas, you know, retailers doing it in certain markets, like for one thing, a retailer doing it, they're already going to be a little more in touch with you all, like the customer, the end user, right? Because, you know, if you're buying a pen directly from me, I want to know that pen inside and out because I'm going to get questions and answer directly to you. And I'm going to have knowledge of a lot of other different types of products besides just that one. So you might ask me a question about a Montblanc, and I may know something about it, but I also know something about the Pilot Vanishing Point and the Visconti Homo sapiens and the Stipula Churia Prisma, and I have perspective across all brands. And while I may have my individual preferences and biases across these brands because I represent all of them, well, not Montblanc, that's a bad example, but all the other ones that I mentioned, because I represent all of them, I have kind of an equal stake across the board. So I, as a retailer, have a little bit more of a vested interest in you across all brands, and I'm not just pushing my one brand. Does that make sense? So it's a little more difficult for them to have kind of that well-rounded perspective across all brands, because for them to know as deep as they know about their brand and try to know about all the other brands when they don't have a vested interest necessarily in doing so, that gets a little difficult. So I think inherently you get influencers or retailers, you know, what influencers being like, you know, people who aren't necessarily selling the products but are doing video reviews, you know, like Matt Armstrong and Stephen Brown and kind folks like that. They are doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, and they know the community, and they are really engaged. So they are more in tune because they're spending a lot of their time doing that. Manufacturers are spending their time trying to develop products and trying to source out materials and do other innovative things. So it's difficult to kind of do both. So I think there's an inherent, that's, just difficulty with doing that. And if there's a lot of good influencers already kind of doing that, they would rather, it's simpler either for them to tap into folks like me or, other influencers and say, hey, can I get you some product to test out? Or can you give me some feedback on this? Or, hey, what's going on in the community? How do we plug into that? That happens a lot. So that's part of the value that I view that we hold here at Goulet is we get to talk to you guys, get a lot of good input from the community, and then I get to translate that to manufacturers and say, hey, you know what? If you guys want any feedback about what type of limited edition Vanishing Point there should be, hey, how about a blue to purple ombre? That would be really amazing. And I can tell them that, and they can take that into account and then maybe develop something like the Twilight, right? Like there's an advantage to doing that. Whereas if they just kind of asked it out to the general community, they're going to get so much feedback, they're not going to know necessarily how to sort through that. But I can kind of, sort and filter through that. Because if you think about it, like they're a manufacturer, especially if they're going globally, they are selling to a lot of different markets. There's a lot of different opinions. Like the Twilight took off like hotcakes in the US, very little interest for it in Europe. So it's just, you never know. It's going to be very different depending on which parts of the world that you're in. And I'm sure some of you, especially if you're from Europe, you're watching this, you're like, what are you, crazy? That pen, I couldn't get my hands on one. But just in general, just in terms of whether the demand was, so there's different things. So there's more of a local focus for like the distributors and retailers and stuff like that for different regions. And then the manufacturers can talk to them because you figure a manufacturer, they may have several different distributors across the world, and they have hundreds, if not thousands, of retailers under those distributors. So just in trying to get feedback from all of their retailers, they could almost get overwhelmed on the feedback, let alone all the customers and end users. So it's so much information to them to sort through. That's part of why I think they don't necessarily do that type of engagement. And then when they do put videos out, it ends up being very kind of, promotional as opposed to deeply engaging like this. Now, all that said, I think that if a manufacturer was to truly embrace that direct connection kind of thing, it would be incredibly powerful. I think they'd get very overwhelmed by the response that they would get. I know Nathan specifically does, from Noodlers, he does his videos, but he has to like not even answer his emails because he gets overwhelmed by the response. He doesn't answer to comments on his videos and stuff like that because he can't handle it. It takes everything just for him to even shoot a video and still produce his products. But then the engagement side can't, it's just too much. So there is a balance to be had there, but I think, personally with what I've experienced as a retailer, it's required a lot. We have a media team of, 7 people plus myself here within our 40-person company. So that is quite a commitment in terms of raw, people power, in terms of what it takes to do the kind of engagement that we have here. It takes a lot, and for a manufacturer to commit, an equal number would be a challenge. But I think at the same time, the payoff would be huge if they wanted to invest in that and do it in a long-term kind of growth perspective. I think that would be tremendous if they were to do that. So I always encourage manufacturers to kind of get into that, but it's not necessarily in most of their wheelhouses. Plus, you get into if these manufacturers are overseas and you get language barriers and that kind of stuff, and how do you market globally and all that kind of stuff. There is a challenge there, but I do think it would be incredibly powerful. So it would be cool. And it's a good question. I'm glad you asked that, Karl. Thank you. Appreciate that little mental exercise there. All right, this next question is from Danielle S on the blog. In the spirit of the Vanishing Point special going on, which Vanishing Point model and finish would you consider most durable for daily use? I want one that won't get easily scratched, nicked, or dented in my fast-paced, multitasking office. I'm constantly picking up and putting down my pens, and I do so quickly. I just don't have the time or attention span to be conscientious and delicate. I want to avoid the disgust with myself when I realize later my carelessness marred the finish. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough question. The thing I will say is like none of the Vanishing Points are like cheap pens, so I wouldn't recommend like just tossing around any of them if you can help yourself, but I will kind of talk you through what I have here. I think the most durable, which is going to be kind of ironic because it's also on the more expensive end, is going to be the Rodin Galaxy, or any of the Rodin finishes, to be honest with you, because they are a Urushi lacquer finish, which is going to be a hard finish. The trim is going to be the same as you would have on, basically any of the others that are not the matte finish, but they're the regular finish trim. So that trim is going to be the same no matter which model, but definitely going with a Urushi pen is going to be the most durable. You're not going to really scratch this unless you are really really careless, it's going to be difficult for you to do that. Now that said, it's also a very pretty pen that if you leave it sitting around your office could easily disappear. So you're going to have to take that into account. That can happen with any of the Vanishing Points because it's a nice looking pen, but particularly this one because it doesn't look like a cheap pen. It looks like a really cool, expensive handmade pen because that's what it is. So that is one that I will say is kind of cool and amazing and you should consider, but with that big old disclaimer, caveat, star, asterisk, whatever by it. The next one I'm going to have, not this particular one, a Twilight, because I would not recommend you throw this around since it's a past limited edition, but this is the one that is a representative of what I have, which is just basically the regular lacquer finish Vanishing Point you can get in a variety of flat colors, and it's going to have your either rhodium or gold trim. It's going to be a pretty good, durable, all-around pen, and you know, it's not really going to scratch very easily. So I think you go with any of the, you know, I wouldn't go with a limited edition one like this one, but if you go with any of the conventional, just plain color Vanishing Points, you could do that. I just don't happen to have any of those in my personal collection, so I grabbed the Twilight because I love looking at it any chance I get. And the last one that I would recommend, last on the totem pole, that would mar the most would be the matte black, or really any of the matte trim finish ones, just because the matte finish, any kind of matte finish, is going to have more of a tendency to show scratching and wear than it would in the shiny stuff, because it has to do with it. It's like a chemical thing. I don't know. There's science involved that I can't really quite explain, but I just remember it back from my woodworking and finishing days when I was working with different types of lacquers and polyurethanes and stuff like that. Anytime that you are having any type of matte finish, you are basically taking, you know, a hard finish, which is the glossy stuff, and you are putting something in it to make it softer and make it smoother. That's, or not smoother, but you're making it softer so that it has a kind of that matte finish. So that is what you're getting into. So you're inherently going to have a little more wear on any kind of a matte finish than you will on a shiny one. Not to mention the fact that you know, when you have something that's like a black finish like this, like these are brass barrels underneath here. So if you get a scratch, any type of scratch, it would have to be a fairly deep scratch, but any type of scratch that you would have, you would then have brass that would show through underneath, so it's going to show more than it would like on a, you know, a different colored pen. So that's probably one of the last ones I would go for. That said, I think it's the coolest, so you should also consider that too. Yeah, like I have a tiny little scratch on mine. I can show you mine. I loaned mine to someone and it came back with a scratch on it. Don't you love that? But this is of course like my one that I use all the time in videos, but there's an example of a little scratch that I have. I have no idea how it happened because I didn't do it, but that's an example of a scratch that happened from somebody probably put it in, they had their keys in or something, but it came back like that. So you can see there's a little bit of the brass underneath, and that's what you get. But anyway, that can happen. That technically could happen on one of these pens too. It just wouldn't be quite as noticeable because of that stark contrast. So hopefully that helps you out, but I do think it would be a fantastic pen for you to carry around. It's great for quick on-the-go stuff in the office, but hopefully that helps narrow down your choices a little bit for you. All right, I got some, next question I have is an ink question. This is from rachelcdlf on Instagram. Is there an ink that has as much shading color variation as Apache Sunset Noodlers, but isn't in the orange family? I love how Apache Sunset is almost 3 colors depending on how much ink you lay down. I agree. I think Apache Sunset is one of the most dramatic colors that are out there. Of course, now, I mean, Apache Sunset for years was like the best shading ink that I would recommend to anybody. Of course, now you end up with a lot of these shimmering and sparkling inks and stuff like that, that you can get some dramatic color shifts in those because of the particulate that are put in there. So Apache Sunset seems relatively conventional compared to some of those, of course, but that's not quite the same effect here. The Apache Sunset really does go from like a lighter yellow to an orange to even a red, depending on how much ink is being put down and stuff. It's really a cool ink. And to be completely honest with you, I've racked my brain and I cannot think of anything in a different color palette that has as much of a color shift kind of thing going on from one color to another. There are a lot of really good shading inks that go from a really light version to a really dark version within kind of a similar color spectrum. You know, if it's like a turquoise, it can go from like a really light turquoise to a darker teal. but nothing that's really quite like that. I mean, there's some inks that have like a heavy sheen to them. Like for example, Diamond Majestic Blue is a deep blue ink that can look a little lighter if it's put down lightly. And if it's really dark, it can not only be dark blue, but a red sheen can come out. So you can get some of that. That has a little bit different effect, a little bit different look than Apache Sunset does, but something like that could work. You know, Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Roses can be like a lighter burgundy into a deep dark, you know, burgundy maroon to a dark black basically. So it can kind of shift like that. That's another one that's really kind of on the extreme end. You know, I mentioned kind of the shimmering inks, so a lot of the diamond shimmer-tastics, especially if you get, you know, if you get something like Golden Sands where it's like a gold color with a gold shimmer, that doesn't seem as extreme. But if you get into something like, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to think of something right now. I'm trying to remember the specific names, but you know, well, I'll skip the shimmer-tastic, but say like the J.R. Bond Emerald of Chabor, which is what I have inked up in my TWSBI here. You know, it's like a deep teal that has a gold shimmer with some red that can come out too. So you can really get some shifts going on with some of these other things. And then, you know, the Nemesine nebulosas that I just talked about earlier in this broadcast can do that as well. So, oh, sorry, I said nebulosa, I meant nebula. The Aurora has the nebulosa. These inks are the nebulas. Anyway, whew, all this stuff blends together and the names get pretty similar. You know, and then I mentioned like Diamond Majestic Blue. Rowan Kleiner Alt Gold Green is a real heavy shader that can be kind of a lighter yellowish green that can get to it like an olive, but there's nothing else quite like Apache Sunset. It really does kind of stand out on its own. But I'm curious if you all have any thoughts, so you can leave any comments if you feel that there is anything that could be comparable in another color. I just couldn't think of one. All right, I got a paper question. This is from chris.percifield on Instagram. If you could only use one journal or notebook for all daily writing, business, or school-related tasks, what would you choose and why? I think it's a great question. I think if you're considering, you know, I always hate answering these one question things because I like to have options. I'm a bit of a hoarder. I have literally bookcases over here of notebooks and different inks, and I have 3 different pen cabinets. So I'm not just limit myself to one. I'm not a minimalist when it comes to pen and writing related supplies, right? Like I'm very much a give myself a lot of options kind of person. But really, if I had to be like stuck into a corner and said you have to choose one type of notebook, it would be very difficult, first of all, because I would love a lot of different ones. But I think it would have to be the Leuchtturm A5 in the dot grid because it's a very versatile notebook. This particular one is the bullet journal version. I don't know if this version necessarily be the critical one, but you know, it's a pretty cool one. It's got a lot of neat features. It's got numbered pages. It's got bookmarks in it. It's got a back pocket. It's a nice hard cover that's not super thick cover too, so it's really nice and kind of easy to carry around. Good sheet count. Paper quality is good. All around, it's just a really solid notebook. And the thing that I really like about the A5 size, and this is just in general A5 size, not specifically about Leuchtturm, of course it fits in there. The A5 size I like, I have very big hands. So if I'm using a small notebook, I get really like fumbly with it, right? Like if I use a notebook that's, I don't even have any like small notebooks on hand, but if I use an A6 or something even smaller, it gets very difficult for me because I like to write big, you know, when I want to, and these little notebooks, they kind of stress me out. So I need something that's a little bit larger, you know, really like the passport size Midori is like about as small as I can really stand. And even then, honestly, lately I've been carrying around the regular size Midori, which when you have this and you are opening it up, you know, it ends up being a little bit closer in size to an A5 size. It's a little thinner, but this is nice as a carry around. But if you're talking to like be versatile enough for all purposes, the A5 size to me would be just about perfect. And Leuchtturm is pretty solid all around notebook. So that would have to be the one that I would choose. Though an honorable nod goes to many different Rhodia versions. The Midori, sorry, excuse me, it's no longer Midori, it's the Traveler's Company Traveler's Notebook. Would get an honorable mention in there as well. Cool. Let's do a couple of troubleshooting questions, shall we? This one is from Newendomsky13 on Instagram. I love a pristine looking clean nib, but I have many pens where ink gets on the surface out of the slit and then I swipe to clean, only to draw more ink out. Sigh. Mechanical feature of capillary action or just me? Also, on demonstrator pens, I always have ink on the top of the nib where it is secured in the grip. Just gotta live with that too, I guess. Okay, so you got a couple different things in here. One is your nib creep question, which is where the ink is coming out of the slit of the nib on the outside, the part where it's outside of the pen. And then the other one is where it's inside the pen. So I'll cover both of those here today. I've talked about nib creep a bunch before, so forgive me if this question will bore you. But I actually wanted to show you some, so I haven't done that as much before. I do have it in Fountain Pen 101 nib terminology because I get asked about nib creep all the time. So I'll show you. I'll zoom in a little bit. Actually, I'll zoom in a lot a bit. This is an Aurora 88. Not a pen that everybody has, but it's a really good example. And it shows you also that nib creep does not discriminate based on price, because this pen is a little bit pricier. So there is an example of nib creep that you're talking about. I have a black ink in here. This is Aurora Black, a very lubricated ink. And you can see there is some black stuff on the nib. And I'm going to wipe it, and it's still there. So I'm going to wipe it again, and it's still there. Wipe it again, and wipe it again, and wipe it again. And I can basically wipe it all day. Actually, that doesn't look too bad. It's actually fairly workable there, but I just keep on wiping it and it's still there. Now this is a flex nib, so this is a little bit different, but not too much. I mean, it can be any pen, it can be any ink. Nib creep does not really discriminate, because what's happening is you're having capillary action that's bringing the ink from the ink chamber through the feed onto the feed on the upper side here, where it mates up to the nib, and then it's mating up to the nib, and then it's traveling down this channel in the feed. Sorry, gosh, I'm getting my terminology all mixed up. It's traveling down the slit of the nib, so it's capillary action all the way as it's feeding through here. And what happens is you get capillary action sometimes that rather than staying in between the slit of the nib, it just kind of whoop, it just wants to come out. You know, it just wants to come say hello, let you know what's there. Personally, I don't think it's such a bad thing. I actually use it as like a, what ink did I put in here? Oh yeah, I have a black in here because I can see it right on my nib. Of course, this says an ink window, so that already tells me. But anyway, you get the idea. So that's one example of what happens there. I have a Visconti Homo sapiens that I've inked up with Diamine Marine. This one is not quite as bad. It gets a little bit on here, but if I wanted to kind of go up there, actually, no, this one's pretty good. Of course, it was doing it right before I recorded the video, and now it's not, so I guess I fixed it. But anyway, I've gotten nib creep on this one before. It happens. Usually the wetter pens will tend to do it, and you have more lubricated ink, the more it'll do it too. That's not the one I wanted to show you. And then I wanted to show you, I have a TWSBI Eco. Now the Eco I wanted to show you, of course, this one's got just stuff all over the nib. So I'll wipe that off, but whoops, there we go. This one's not creeping too bad at the moment. But this pen is a demonstrator, and what you're talking about on the second part of your question is ink that's getting on top of the nib as it's sitting in here. You can see there's like kind of the edge of the nib, you know, and basically what's happening is ink is getting all up on top of the surface of the nib as it's sitting inside the pen. That is happening on basically every single pen. You're just seeing it happen here because it's clear. That's all it is. So it's a demonstrator pen, you're gonna see this, and you are just gonna have to get used to that. The nib creep thing, you can do some stuff to kind of get around it if you want to. You can try changing different inks, different nibs, or different pens. You can try diluting the ink a little bit. I would do it in small quantities first to see if it actually makes a difference, but you know, that can do it sometimes, because what's exacerbating the nib creep, honestly, most of the time is lubricant that's inside the ink. The more lubricated an ink is, the more it's going to creep on you, because the lubricant's gonna like kind of, you know, not get scientific on you, but it's gonna basically cause it to creep more. And if you are diluting it, you're essentially cutting down the effectiveness of that lubricant. So that might help. Of course, if you dilute it too much, that'll cause different issues with flow and the appearance of the color actually on the page. So that's something to take into account. But this, what you're seeing here, you know, clear nib and clear feed, clear grip. And you're going to see that, like you're going to see ink in here as well. It's going to pocket in certain places. That's just how it's going to go. And you can't really do anything about that other than embrace it. Me personally, as far as nib creep goes, a long time ago, I'm talking like 6, 7 years ago, I gave up even stressing about nib creep in any fashion, and my fountain pen life has been much better since. Some people are really particular about nib creep and do not want it as part of their life, and they'll literally not use a certain pen or ink or combo because they don't want the nib creep, and you're more than entitled to have that a part of your experience. More power to you. Me personally, I just made a little bit of my own expectation shift, and I am able to enjoy a lot of different combinations of pen and ink that if I was to use nib creep as a criteria, I'd be really missing out on a huge part of the writing experience by having that combo. So I don't really stress about it. I don't think you should really stress about it either, unless it's actually like causing problems and like dripping out of the pen and stuff like that. Then it's not so much a nib creep issue. Then you've got something else going on that is more serious and needs to be addressed. But really this nib creep thing is just purely an aesthetic thing. As I like to say, it's a feature, not a bug. All right, and then the last question I have for this week, this is another troubleshooting one. This question is from Nick Conkling on Instagram. If I leave my pens in my car, at what temperatures would it start to be an issue? Could the ink freeze in my pen? If so, will this alter the ink properties in the pen? Can inks start to have problems as they get too hot as well? Thank you. All right, Nick, I can't tell you that there's like an exact temperature that you have to worry about because I haven't like tested it scientifically. It's a little clearer on the freezing side than it is on the hot side because ink is mostly made of water. And when water gets to a certain temperature, it will freeze. So that is a pretty clear delineator between when it's a problem and when it's not. Now, as far as when you asked about, will it alter the ink properties of the pen? Not usually, because if the ink freezes and then it thaws back out, it just returns back to its normal state. Now, certain inks will perform better when they get down to that like really cold, almost freezing kind of temperature. And there are certain inks, for example, the Noodler's Polar series of inks, they are actually designed not to freeze at freezing temperatures. I think you can go 20 below or maybe even more of Fahrenheit anyway. You can go even lower than that, I think, on some of them. And so you can get pretty darn cold. We actually had a blog post a while ago that we did where we had some scientists from Australia take them on an expedition they did down in the South Pole. And at the, maybe not the South Pole, but down in Antarctica. And they actually took some of our Noodler's inks down there and tested them in real Arctic temperatures. So it was pretty cool. But I think it was, they experienced no problems with those. So that if you're really concerned about it, you can always consider something like the Polar inks. I've heard other people, this is not something I maybe necessarily recommend for everybody, but literally I've heard of some people that have taken and diluted their ink with vodka so that it won't freeze as much. Now, I wouldn't say that using alcohol in your pens is a good practice as a general rule, but if you're really in a pinch and you have a pen that's maybe not of the highest, concern of yours, and you want to do that, I could certainly see that being something that would be fun to try. That's something. I don't think you have to be worried about it ruining the properties of the ink. I think it's more about ruining the pen. If you had a pen that was full of ink and it froze, perhaps the expansion of the mostly water, which is your ink, could cause you to have some cracking and leaking issues with your pen if it freezes and expands and causes issues there. That I would be a little more concerned about, not so much what's going to happen to the ink. And then you get the other side where it gets really hot. Again, I have not tested this scientifically. It definitely gets, I'm in central Virginia here. It does get below freezing at times here, but we're not there a lot. So I don't really ever have to worry about pens freezing before. I've left cold pens in the car, and especially if you're keeping it inside a pen case or something, it's going to be insulated, so you're going to be able to be okay most of the time if you're dealing with kind of freezing stuff. If you're not in like really frigid temperatures on a regular basis, then you might want to just be a little more diligent about that. When you're talking about hot stuff, that's where it becomes more of an issue of like leaving it in your car because right now it's late June. in Virginia, and we are getting into the 90s and approaching 100 on certain days, and especially when you're talking about in a hot car that's all closed up, it's well over 100 easily inside that car. And if you leave a pen in there all day, it could be an issue. And really the main issue is going to be because of the air expansion due to the heat, which could cause burping out of the pen. It could cause, rapid drying out of the pen, and it could cause if you leave the pen out and you have direct like UV exposure, it could either break down the ink and kind of cause it to degrade, or it could even cause some issues with like UV degradation with certain types of plastic and other things like that. So it's just not a good. I definitely wouldn't leave it like out in the UV sunlight, direct sunlight, and like on your dashboard or anything like that. Have it try and tucked away somewhere. But I feel like around probably 100 degrees Fahrenheit or so is where I would start to not be super comfortable with it. I personally try not to leave my pens in the car when it's that hot, but oftentimes I'll have my pens in a case like this, or the Visconti case or something like that. They'll be in there, it'll be inside my backpack maybe, and my backpack will be in the car, but I've never had any problems that I've noticed as a long-term problem being in central Virginia here. Now, if I was, in a much hotter climate, like I know there's places in the US like Arizona and stuff like that where it gets in the 120s and stuff like that, and then you get a hot car on top of that temperature, that could be problematic. But as a general rule, I don't hear pens being left in hot cars as being like something that is a real problem. It's just something you'll want to be conscious of. Make sense? Cool. All right, that's all I got for this week. My question of the week for this week, I'm kind of curious. The notebook question got me thinking. I ask a lot about pens and ink and stuff like that. I don't really dive deep on notebooks a lot of the time, especially in the question of the week. So I'm curious for you, what do you consider to be your ultimate notebook? Like, what is the best notebook for you? And why? I'd be really curious to know, because if there's one thing I know about people who get into paper, it's that everybody's got a different opinion. So I'd love to hear what you have to think, and I can read about it in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. You can check out a lot of what I talked about on gouletpens.com. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I hope you have a very wonderful, happy 4th of July if you're from the US and you celebrate that. That would be great. Nice little Independence Day. So I forgot to mention that at the beginning of this broadcast here. But, well, if you're still here, you're more power to you. You'll get a little bonus information here, but our office is going to be closed on July 4th. We'll be a little short-staffed on July 3rd because we have a lot of people that are going to be out. So that is something that you'll want to take into account. So just be aware that we're not going to be able to answer phone calls and stuff like that actually on the 4th, but it should be good otherwise. But I hope you have a fantastic weekend and a great rest of your week. Thanks so much for watching, and right on.